In this update, we've got two large storm systems to talk about over the next 7 to 10 days. So we're going to break down the details for you. In this update, expanding the view on the satellite picture, it's still just bone dry for those areas out west. They are just begging for rain. Unfortunately, they're not going to get any. Where they are going to get everything is across the middle part of the country, especially there in the upper Midwest. We had some 80, even 91-mile-per-hour wind gusts there in Lincoln, Nebraska this morning. And these are formidable storms that will leave some pretty intense winds along its path and some heavier rainfall. And it doesn't look to go anywhere anytime soon, as it's over. It could be looking at some training thunderstorms, could set up flash flooding setup over the next couple of days. We also have an area of disturbed weather off the Carolina coast that could also leave some very torrential heavy rains, especially along the coastal regions. But that's actually going to be sneaking down towards the Bahamas and actually moving across Florida, where it could actually re-emerge back over into the eastern Gulf. In fact, the latest update from the European guidance on the ensemble views has a low end probability of this trying to form into a weak little tropical depression. I don't think it actually gets there, but nonetheless, it's still going to spread heavy rains along the coastal area. So if you live in Florida, do expect some heavy torrential downpours over the coming days. And this will continue from a east to west trajectory across areas along the coast and eventually head over into Louisiana by the time we head into that Tuesday time frame. So, and then we also have another storm way out there in the Atlantic. This is a formidable wave that's coming off the coast of Africa, and the National Hurricane Center has in fact upgraded this to a 40% probability of this becoming our next named storm over the next 7 days. So it typically takes about 2 weeks for a wave to come off the coast of Africa to traverse across the Atlantic to make it anywhere close to the United States. And most guidance actually puts it north of Puerto Rico in about 10 days or so. But that will be our next large storm that we're going to be talking about and tracking over the coming days. So for right now, we've got the storm system that's impacting areas across the middle part of the country, especially for those areas across the upper Midwest. That's where the most of the intense storms are going to be taking place over the next several days. In fact, that's where they have the severe weather watches in place with the severe weather that's going to be unfolding this afternoon. It's coming out of Nebraska. Now it's going to highlight over those areas of Iowa, back in northern portions of Missouri, getting into Wisconsin tonight, as well as into northern Illinois, along with some pretty intense heavy rainfall. You could be looking at some training supercell thunderstorms. They've in fact upgraded this to a moderate risk for excessive rainfall, especially those areas saturated in Iowa, where they had their most rainfall ever on record in the month of July. And obviously that's just continuing in August now with another system impacting that region. So do expect things to go downhill later on this afternoon into the evening time frame. And there's the heavy rain that will spread from our little tropical low off the coast of California, especially there in Savannah, Georgia. They've had several, flood warnings, and they'll be likely getting more today. That will be spreading across Florida. And there's the setup for tomorrow, yet another back-to-back moderate risk for excessive rainfall in literally the same areas. It really doesn't go anywhere. So that's why flash flooding is going to be a huge concern for these areas along the upper Midwest, as well as along the coastal areas into the Carolinas, getting into Georgia, back into the Florida region. For the next 2 days, we've got some pretty formidable wind gusts. There were the winds that already verified 90 miles an hour this morning in Nebraska. That will likely swing across northern portions of Missouri today, getting into Iowa. That's where they have the severe weather threat in place, especially those areas into Wisconsin. That will be the next 2 days, because like I showed you, it really doesn't go anywhere for the next 2 days. And this is some healthy rainfall. It's going to leave its mark. So these areas have received a ton of rain over the last 6 weeks. So this is kind of the last thing they want, but they're going to be getting hit hard yet again. For same areas that have been hit over the last 6 weeks, we continue to rake across with another little boundary system that would be slowly progressing from northwest to southeast. And there are the flooding rains along the Carolina coast as well as into Florida. In fact, let's zoom into some of these impressive rainfall totals just over the next 2 days on some of the high resolution guidances. Yes, just along the coastal areas, Charleston, Savannah could pick up 3, 4, 5 inches of rain, and definitely not out of the question in some of these isolated areas. 6, 8, maybe even isolated 10-inch total is probably not out of the question, as they just kind of sits there, especially with daytime heating, getting some of those 1 to 2 inch per hour rainfall rates that could just really add up. And as that disturbance just kind of continues to drift south and will likely move across Florida, they're going to have their own opportunities with some heavier rains, especially there into the afternoon hours with the heating action. And that's the system that will likely get off into the eastern Gulf and possibly form, it's not, again, it's not going to take a name or anything like that, but it'll at least keep aggravating those same areas with tropical downpours along the coast. At the same time, we're watching our little cool fronts. You got back-to-back, moderate risk for excessive rainfall, and now we have another slight risk going into Monday. And again, this is not covering that much real estate. It doesn't really move that far. It might drift a little bit further south, trying to impact those areas into Oklahoma, but we're talking it might move a couple 100 miles in about a 3-day time span. That's why we have a lot of the areas under flash flood watches currently at the moment. And if you're in the middle part of the country, you will experience just a slight cool down. We've got widespread heat advisories going on today. That will be a distant memory by the time we head into Tuesday. With that little slight cool down, any relief they can get, they will certainly welcome it. Where they don't get relief is out west. That's where the ridge really starts to build back with a vengeance, and the heat is on, especially along the west coast. That's where all the fires have been. Of course, that's where there's no rain in sight as well. So it's just a compounding effect. And we've already seen the Gifford fire approaching over 100,000 acres now with only 20% containment. So this is the last thing they want to see in that neck of the woods, with no rain in sight. And the heat is on for going into Monday. We got 98 degrees for Portland, 102 in Salem, as well as Eugene, all the way up to 108 there in Medford. That's hot for the Pacific Northwest. Some of these areas don't even have air conditioning. So that's going to be some brutal stuff to contend with. And even inland, you're going to be experiencing some 100-degree heat. And if you expand the view and take a look at the big picture, of course, the desert Southwest are always hot this time of year, but we've got triples along the West Coast, and then also inland back into Idaho, 90s across the middle part of the country. And there's the little slight cool down for areas of Oklahoma, only 88 degrees as we head into that Tuesday afternoon. Even low 90s there in Dallas is definitely below average for the hottest time of the year. So they'll take any brief little cool down they're going to be able to get. It's because, wow, look at the next 7 days. There you talking about, it's just, there's nothing, guys. There's nothing happening across the West Coast. The stories are the fires and the heat, and unfortunately that we don't really have any relief in sight coming anytime soon with bone dry conditions out west. And there's the ridge by Wednesday. There's the setup. We've got the little bit of a weakness, right? That's why we have that slight cool down across the middle part of the country, because the ridge backs off. That will allow at least opportunities for these areas across the southern regions to have some isolated sporadic showers in the heat of the afternoon, and those will tend to die off as they lose kind of daytime heating. That goes through Tuesday and Wednesday, but by the time we head into Friday coming up for next week, yeah, the ridge just builds back, right? It's August, it's the hottest time of the year, and the ridge will just likely build back across the middle part of the country. So obviously the cool down doesn't really last that much longer. And when it does come back, obviously with the added rain they're going to be adding to it, combined with the ridge back in place that only just increases the humidity values, that's why we see those extreme heat warnings and watches likely trying to come back for those areas across Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Missouri, back into the middle part of the country, Nebraska, Kansas, getting into Nebraska. There's also another pocket of high humidity up there across New England. We'll be looking at New York, getting into Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, Massachusetts, those areas across Rhode Island. Do expect the heat will likely build towards the middle of the month and even the couple of days after that. And we'll be watching that big storm system that just is now coming off the African coast. So usually when storms continue on the weaker side, they tend to travel further west. So these storms that do come off the coast of Africa, they tend to develop rapidly. They definitely tend to curve up and out to sea quicker. But this one's a different beast. It actually continues on the weaker side. That will allow the westward trajectory, which is what it expected from the National Hurricane Center, through day 7. If we extend it to day 10, most of the guidances has it north of Puerto Rico, right? So this will be crucial. Does it in fact continue on that weaker side? That will tend to favor a more westerly track towards the Bahamas, or does it start ramping up too soon and take a more trajectory out to sea? So we do feel that it's going to be ramping up big time. Does it ramp up soon enough that it's going to be taken out to sea, or does it wait and hold and continue further west? So of course we're talking a long ways out. This is the 10-day period. So beyond that, we'll be looking at through the 19th time frame. It's going to be somewhere in this vicinity off the East Coast, which is still a good ways away. So we'll be watching this and fine-tuning this after we get after middle of August. So guys, I appreciate you watching. Do like this video, definitely hit the subscribe button, and catch me next update where I protect you before and after the storm.